would be, but if you are, I'm, of course, the Outlaw Adam Knight, and I have been the Outlaw Adam Knight for the last 30 years. Yes, for 30 full freaking years. I've been a professional wrestler more in the city of Winnipeg and based out of Canada. More than that, though, I also try to be somewhat of an engaging fellow, and I have a lot of different interests, Tonight's interests are going to be a little bit different. Obviously, I'm going to plug a little bit the big wrestling show I've got this Friday. I'm going to take an opportunity to talk about my lovely books that anybody can pick up anytime on Amazon or at any event live. But tonight, we have a special guest. My next guest needs an introduction only to those who are my followers that haven't been around for a while. If you're in any way a fan of movies or cinema and you're based in the city of Winnipeg, odds are you know my next guest very well. He's the long-running host of Ultrasonic Film on UMFM. He's been running that show for 25 long, glorious years. He's the best interviewer and the greatest film expert I possibly know. Ladies and gentlemen, I do want to introduce you to my good dear friend, Mr. James Borsa. James, are you there with me tonight? And can you hear me, my brother?
I can hear you, and I am here. How are you doing, Adam?
I am doing great, James. I really am. It's great to see you, considering all the times we've spent together in the past. It's one thing I like about doing this show is the fact that I'm getting a chance to have conversations with old friends and buddies of mine that just through life and whatever have just fallen by the wayside. Not that I've thought any less of you or anything like that, of course, over the course of time, he says, trying to cover his own ass here, but just because we're old men and we've fallen down different paths. But I meant what I said. As somebody who grew up, obviously, loving the arts and loving film and loving television and acting and performing and all that stuff, quite obviously, outside of just the fights and the tights and the men and, who are oiled up and doing that sort of stuff, I've always loved cinema. And so as we came into contact a little bit later on, later in high school and then, of course, into, university years, I realized what a cinephile you were. And through our interaction and our working together and our being really good friends, I developed a deeper understanding not only of cinema in general and movies in general, but also a lot about film criticism and the importance of that. And so I just want to say for that, in that regard, thank you, because in case I never said it prior to that, even though sometimes we fought about it, because, I'm a lunkhead, I've always enjoyed the fact that, we were able to have discourse and go back and forth on that topic. So first and foremost, thank you very much. Welcome to the show, and thank you for your time tonight.
Well, yes, you're most certainly welcome, and thanks for having me on. I'm flashing back to a lot of these conversations that we had about movies way back when, and there certainly were some heated discussions and debates, but I definitely think we both learned a little bit more back in the old days there. Sure. And it's great to be here. Thanks very much for having me, Adam.
I appreciate you being here, James. I really do. Thank you for that. So I do want to say, for those of you who aren't familiar, I don't know how you couldn't be. You've been running Ultrasonic Film on the University of Manitoba radio station for 25 years?
A little bit longer than that, actually. I started in September of 1998, so 2018 September will be 30 years.
That is fucked up, if I can be so blunt. It's great. Of course, I'm not one to talk. I'm the one who's advertising, 30 years of the Outlaw Adam Knight t-shirts. So, who am I to say about, somebody who does something they love for, as long as they possibly can. And I think that's great. I've always, for the record, I've always admired that, and I've always applauded the fact that you've found something, an opportunity to really dive into something you really are passionate about and have been able to follow it for all this time. And I think that's great. And that's honestly one of the side lessons about some of the stuff I talk about on this show. And it's finding the things you love and making the most of it, because it's the only way to really enrich your life. But
no, it's very, very true. I would agree with you there. And I'm very excited that I've recently been putting some of my older interviews as well as new interviews on my new YouTube channel. So that's been a lot of fun as well.
I have noticed that. You've been doing like your 7 movies in 7 minutes thing, right?
Absolutely. I've been putting some classic interviews on there and again, new interviews, but I also decided that, people, they want their film recommendations fast. So I decided to recommend 7 movies in less than 7 minutes. And so far I've pulled it off a few times and it's a lot of fun. Of course, the channel is called Ultrasonic Film on YouTube. And I've been having a blast doing that.
I love it, man. I love it. Yeah. So if anyone's out here right now and they're following along, yes, please go check out Ultrasonic Film on YouTube. and give James a follow, give him some likes and some love. James has got a very eclectic sense of, of film knowledge and of course film favorites, right? While obviously, we can talk about the highbrow and the Alfred Hitchcocks and things like that. I also know what a big James Cameron fan you are.
Yes, very, very true. And also, I love B movies. I love period pieces. My taste in film is right across the board. And for that reason, it's a lot of fun to be able to interview so many different people.
Right on. So with that said, I'm a little bit out of the loop. I love whenever you get a chance to post a new interview or one of your classics. But I always remember how excited you were back in the day when you got to interview Jennifer Tilly when she came in for Bride of Chucky. That was a big one. You got to interview Michael Biehn, obviously, from Aliens and not Predator, excuse me, Terminator. Oh God, there's like 90 other films I can mention of his that he's done. But of course, yeah, you've been the go-to guy, much like I've been the go-to guy for the last 30 years. Whenever a named wrestler comes through town that needs to, have somebody reliable to work with. When one of the stars of Hollywood and Hollywood North comes through, they seem to end up talking to Mr. James Borsa at some point in time.
Well, it's interesting. While I do occasionally luck out and manage to chat with people here in the city, I've also developed a real network and friendship with publicists, both in Vancouver and Toronto. And I'm very, very happy about that because they do hook me up with a lot of interviews as well. But I do, in fact, get very, very lucky. In fact, I met Michael Biehn at Movie Village and managed to get an interview with him off of that. And when Jennifer Tilly was in town, I interviewed her in person at the Hotel Fort Garry. So yes, there's been a lot of Winnipeg connections as well.
That's been fantastic. I know. I always love the fact that not only have you been fortunate enough to meet some of the stars and the bigger names as they come through town, you also really get to go out of your way to speak to the local artists that are on their way up and really get a chance to, work with not just work with, but also get a chance to expose their work out into the world. Because even before today's fractured media landscape where, you can find something on like 19 different apps, never mind on YouTube or whatsoever, even before that, it was very difficult for somebody to get anything into the public eye. So I've always admired that. Who are some of, like, say, your local, like either Winnipeg or Canadian favorites that you can think of that you would want to reference and to give the rub to at this point in time?
Oh, absolutely. It's very interesting that you'd say that because when I started the show in 1998, the internet was in its infancy, and there really wasn't much happening as far as a worldwide level for me to interview people. It took a couple of years before I could talk to people from different countries in Los Angeles. So my very first few interviews were definitely out of the Winnipeg Film Group. I was talking to directors there, and I still talk to directors there when they have festivals, when they have premieres. If I get a chance, I get to chat with them. Of course, local festivals, Gimli Film Festival, Freeze Frame, a lot of these Reel to Reel Festival. I just did an interview off of that as well. So there is a lot of really great festivals where I can talk to a lot of filmmakers locally. As for names, Sean Garrity is a big one for me because I interviewed him about his very first short film. And Sean and I have talked about every single one of his films. And he's done many, many features since then. And every time he premieres a feature, we get in touch and we do an interview, usually live, which is a rarity for me. I don't do a lot of live interviews now. I tend to edit a lot, but it's always fun to be able to do live interviews too. I definitely have an opinion on doing interviews online because there's so much that can go wrong and has gone wrong. And that's a lot of the reasons, of course, why I do these interviews, record them, and then kind of edit them afterwards. Because, as you know, it can be very, very difficult online. But don't worry about it at all. I'm game for this stream, and I'm having a lot of fun there, Adam. So yeah, that's cool. So no worries there. As for my opinion on how streaming has changed the landscape, well, I could talk probably on that for hours and hours. The big thing is that movies are no longer big. I mean, when we were younger, something like Raiders of the Lost Ark or E.T. or Star Wars were enormous cultural events. Now there's hundreds of films being released on streaming all the time. And even movies in the theaters have kind of shrunk in scope because of that. There's just so much selection, and that has definitely changed the landscape.
Absolutely. And I would tend to agree with that. And I would definitely say that, in my opinion, that certainly has changed the way studios look at their own products, the way they look at their own IP. They're always hunting after that really big opening, big box office weekend, oftentimes at the detriment of all of the more mid-sized and smaller films and projects that are out there, right? Like once upon a time, we were talking at the beginning of the show about our love for B movies and smaller films and things like that. Something that would have been made for, like, say, 10 to 20 million dollars, right, might have a short run in the theaters, but would live on forever on VHS and DVD. Now, those movies, if they're being made at all, are being thrown right on Prime, being thrown right in Netflix, being thrown right in Quibi, and maybe we never see it again. So it's
I
really
would
hard to say.
definitely say that those films are still being made. I'm talking to a lot of the directors and actors from these lower budgeted films
Yeah.
that are still made for a few $1,000,000 here and there. I would also say, to your point there of studios kind of trying to hone in on the next big thing, they're definitely, from a cultural point of view, they're definitely trying to throw a lot of politics in their films. Which I don't always agree with. I think films should primarily be entertainment, so that can be a little problematic too.
Interesting. I would probably push back and say that art has always been political, and I would say that any form of expression would have some sort of a political slant to it. Obviously, there are some more heavy-handed examples than others. And I would hope that, that in general, art having somewhat of a liberal slant because it is art, it would, probably offend some people that might be closed-minded and bigoted. And then they would push back with things, coming out of Angel Studios involving, anyways, we're not going to get too deep into the woods in that because you might end up interviewing somebody.
I don't think so. Yeah, I think it would be best not to, but I like your use of the word heavy-handed. I would definitely say that's how studios are approaching scripts, characters, and politics, sadly. And but yeah, it's unfortunate because I think a lot of great filmmakers that we've had in the past, there will be very, very few of them in the future. And even if they are around, will their movies be seen? And will they have the kind of cultural landscape that they've had in the past? I'm doubtful, but I'm hopeful at the same time.
Well, and I think, along with everything else, I think that as the media landscape changes and the art space changes and becomes more welcoming to people with diverse opinions and diverse viewpoints, that then there's a landscape for everybody, right? We are also talking about, like, when we grew up, back in the, we were born in the late 70s, growing up in the 80s and 90s, you're right, films were more of a cultural event. So they had a greater chance to be seen by a greater audience because there was fewer options out there for people to be distracted by. The competition was both not as great and greater depending on what you were looking for. Now, with it being everywhere, you have the opportunity for more people to come to the table and express their art however they may choose to do so. Though that may, again, as we did describe, some of it sometimes can be heavy-handed, and sometimes it can be overly safe and bland. And I think if my options for dinner are potatoes with a side of potatoes, or maybe I get a little spicy in there once in a while, I think I'm okay with giving it a try now and then.
Most of my favorite films are, I don't want to say all because I do see some good new films, usually a couple a year.
Yeah.
But most of my favorite films are from 30 years ago.
Sure.
Yeah, 40 years ago now. So it's a shame, but I mean, it is what it is. Every once in a while, though, one comes out that really surprises me. I just saw a film, actually, I interviewed the director. It's called Islands, and it's going to be coming out very soon. It's kind of a drama thriller, but also a character study, beautifully told. Really surprised me.
Okay, good to know. Good to know. I know it's. I think in that regard, though, as well, I think that's just a product of, forgive me for saying this, men of our generation. It's very common for, no matter what the medium is, to look back on the stuff that we grew up on and the stuff that really, really sung to us when we were in our developing years. And it's hard to look past it. Like, I'm still a big Bon Jovi guy. I listen to their stuff all the time. It's still my walkout music. But now I'm at an age where my 12-year-old's trying to get me into Chappell Roan, and I'm like, this isn't working for me. Now,
To a certain degree, I might agree with you. Although to be honest, I see a lot of stuff that surprises me that I enjoy. For instance, I just saw an animated film called Lesbian Space Princess, and it was made out of Australia, and it's a hoot. It's very well done. So if the film is good, I can get into it. But unfortunately, I would make the argument that we have less good films now.
interesting. I would also argue that good is subjective, and as we've said before, what we like is what we like. And I often, because I know how difficult it is to make and produce anything, anytime you get anything that makes it to the, well, it used to be celluloid, now it's like to the digital screen and gets up on a projector, that's kind of a victory as far as I'm concerned. And it's willing, and it's worthy of at least a modicum of praise and a handshake, provided it's not, absolute horseshit. But that's again.
Well, again, and I'm envious. I am envious of folks that really can enjoy most everything, and I would love to. Maybe I've been watching films for too long, but when I really see a film exceptionally well crafted, you realize how good films can be. So yeah, I would definitely agree with you though that it's a sliding scale.
And it is funny because sometimes I find that something that may not have spoken to me at one point in time, it's worth it for me to revisit it somewhere down the road, right? Because then I oftentimes find, I'm trying to think of an example off the top of my head, and I had one and it's gone. But there was a movie I watched several years ago that did not speak to me at all, and then was convinced to rewatch it recently, and I was like, well, shit, would you look at this? This is a lot more clever than I gave it credit for at the time. So much that I think, and you may or may not agree on this one, goes with your mindset when you go into watching something. You have to always take into account when you go into anything, and I know you've tried to do this many times because you've been reviewing movies for a long time. You always try to go into it with as clean of a slate and open of mind as possible.
I always try to like a film that I'm watching. I give a film 110% of a shot, and it's unfortunate. A few do fall by the wayside, but I can usually find some value in a film that I'm watching. So I think that's kind of where you're going from. You try and find some value in a film that you're watching. And because I'm often interviewing the actors and directors, I certainly look to see if I can find that value. And when I do, I certainly do highlight it.
Absolutely. And that's important. It's important to be able to find the good in everything. Again, it is such a subjective thing. We are.
Well, it's a good thing about life in general, right? You want to find the good in everything.
Boy, do we. Boy, do we. Now more than ever. Or maybe that's just me being old and political. Anyways. As a film critic, and now I'm not sure how plugged you are into like the online world of film criticism.
Before you ask the question, if you don't mind my saying, I do find that I haven't reviewed movies very often. My show is generally for at least probably the last 10 years or so, maybe closer to 7 years. I've basically been doing interviews with actors and directors. About 7 to 10 years ago, I'd say about 2016, the reviewing films became more of a toxic thing. And I kind of stepped a little bit back from that. And so I prefer much to interview rather than actually review films.
I am so glad you said that, because that was sort of the vein of my question.
Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped ahead, but go ahead.
No. Step on it. It's fine. It's because at about that time, 7 or 8 years ago, I was getting into the with the advent of like groups like Screen Junkies and Rotten Tomatoes and things like that, and their own like web series and things and shows of that nature. As people started to find their way to monetize fandoms and monetize films, etc., by having opinions on it, it did seem to me very quickly that it stopped being something where it was about the love of the project and the love of the art, and it very quickly turned into a red eyes and a thumbnail and how many sins can we find in this movie and all that other bullshit. And I will tell you, it is funny how quickly things that I used to love from groups that I thought were really, really, really coming at something I enjoy for the right reasons, or suddenly are finding only reasons to hate it, only reasons to talk about, all the backstage rumors that may or may not have been true about the cancellation of a project, or these directors got fired, so we had to bring in Ron Howard, or, if this thing doesn't make $300 million opening weekend, it doesn't match its marketing budget, so it's a failure. What does that have to do with the actual film? Is oftentimes my question. Yes.
Well, like I say, and that's certainly a valid point. I also do find a lot of these guys entertaining. One of my favorites is the Critical Drinker. He's usually he's very sharp. He reviews films from a screenplay point of view, but he's harsh and he's tough. But he is entertaining. Although when I'm doing my show and now my YouTube channel, I definitely don't want to go negative. I'm not a going negative kind of guy. I'm interviewing people. I'm interviewing directors. I'm interviewing actors. I want to like their product and I want to promote their film. And as you met, it's their art, and you want to be able to see if you can get something out of it of value. And I definitely do make a real solid choice to try and do that. Sometimes it doesn't happen. Sometimes the film is so bad that I have to be very careful how I choose my questions when I'm chatting with them. But
the lighting was very competent. Yes, I know.
Yeah, exactly. Extremely competent lighting. But mostly I can find stuff that's very good, and often their films are well above average. So it is nice to be able to see this. And getting back to what we were saying earlier about the $10 million film, the $5 million film, I should mention that these filmmakers often have bet their life and their savings on these films. So there's real passion to tell the story that they want to tell, which I think actually makes these films often much more valuable and more worthwhile than a lot of the $200 and $300 million films, which are put together by a committee in a corporation, where these filmmakers are betting their life that they can actually get this film out there. And often that adds to the good vibes of these films.
There is something to be said for, if this doesn't work, I'm screwed. There is that, you do get that level of desperation's not the right word, but let's call it passion. Right?
Passion is good.
Passion's good. You're right. You're right, to be sure. But every one of those directors wants to be the one where it's like, they certainly hope that their next film isn't one that they have to remortgage their house for. But that's everything for the pursuit of the art, right? You're doing it for the love of the game at that point in time, and I think that is very, very, very valid. Oh my goodness, that was a lot of stuff that I wanted to talk about. All right.
Could I also throw out a plug right now for Ultrasonic Film?
Please.
Okay, so as I've mentioned, the YouTube channel is Ultrasonic Film. I have a very special interview, which I'm trying to launch tomorrow morning. I think I can get it out tomorrow morning. It's with Milla Jovovich, and I'm going to be chatting with her about her new film, Protector, which is coming out to theaters. And it is a kick-ass action film, just absolutely teeming with action and lots of twists and turns. And it was a real pleasure to chat with her because I've been watching her in movies for about 30 years. So it was pretty cool to be able to chat with Milla Jovovich. And again, that's going to be out on Ultrasonic Film's YouTube channel tomorrow morning. And on Monday, I believe, I'm going to drop my Michael Biehn Talks About Tombstone interview, because I asked Michael Biehn about Tombstone and I found some really cool clips. So I'm putting that together as a YouTube video as well. So I've got two very upcoming videos that I'm very excited about.
That's fantastic. And that's a big get. We've been watching Milla Jovovich since Fifth Element and forward, right? So a couple of Resident Evil movies. She was Joan of Arc, if you can believe that. A lot of really interesting stuff.
I got to ask her about Zoolander as well, which was a lot of fun.
Out. That question may have been more fun than Zoolander was, but we'll leave that alone.
Oh, I like Zoolander, but stay away from the sequel.
I stayed away from Zoolander. It's okay. One of two movies at Cinema City 8 that I walked out of. It's all right. Yeah, all right. All right. Well, James, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I know it's late. I appreciate you taking the time to chat with a little buddy about stuff.
No worries.
I know. I appreciate it, man. Thank you for your time. Again, thank you for your friendship. It's been a long time since we've had a chance to do this sort of stuff. I do want to make the time to do this off camera if possible, but for right now, I am definitely mining all of my friends that have very interesting, jobs and passions, and so that way I can do more than just talk about, what a sad boy I am in pro wrestling and my writing on here. But that's all good. So
Sounds good.
everybody, please go check out James Borsa's channel, Ultrasonic Film. If you're ever, in the city of Winnipeg, within the city limits, please turn to, it's not 95.9, what is it? 101.5
You got
UMFM.
it.
Check it on the FM dial. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. James Borsa, thank you for your time today.
Yeah. Thank you very, very much. I appreciate it, Adam. And Ultrasonic Film airs Thursday night at 10 p.m. on 101.5 or www.umfm.com. And again, the YouTube channel, Ultrasonic Film. Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Adam.
I really appreciate it too. Guys, I'm going to cut it off here. I'm going to do a follow-up in a little bit here. I think I may have to do some editing on this one for the before it goes double live, but that's all right. Thank you guys very much. You've been listening to Outlaw Radio. This is James Borsa from Ultrasonic Film. I am the Outlaw Adam Knight. Thank you for your time tonight, and good night.
Good night.